There seems to be a war over Russia brewing at the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council is an important Washington, D.C. think tank dedicated to promoting human rights and democracy. We now have two of its experts who have come forward and said that, quote, democratizing Russia may not actually be in the foreign policy interests of the United States. This is some of what they said.
Policymakers should avoid a human rights first approach to Russia. Democratization in Russia would not necessarily be good for US foreign policy interests.
Slammed by other fellows of the Atlantic Council. We had 22 Atlantic Council individuals signing a document denouncing them and distancing themselves from this statement. They said that they feel that this statement by their two colleagues misses the mark. This is their response.
Their article is premised on a false assumption that human rights and national interests are wholly separate, and that US policy toward Russia was and remains driven by human rights concerns principally. In fact, previous administrations and the current one have sought to integrate our values and other national interests.
The United States often claims it's promoting human rights around the world when it overthrows governments. In Libya, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, the United States claimed it was bringing freedom to the countries when it invaded and destabilized the countries with pretty catastrophic results. In Syria, the United States backed the opposition with similar rhetoric. Now, Antony Blinken, the new U.S. Secretary of State, says that now Washington will not be using force in its efforts to promote human rights and democracy around the world.
We will incentivize democratic behavior, but we will not promote democracy through costly military interventions or by attempting to overthrow authoritarian regimes by force. We've tried these tactics in the past. However well-intentioned, they haven't worked.
Well, he's certainly correct in saying that they haven't worked. They've simply resulted in chaos and more suffering in country after country after country. But now the question must be raised, if U.S. military interventions and force is not going to be used to promote or spread human rights and democracy, how exactly does the United States intend to do it?
Well, former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer Scott Ritter says containing Russia is still a key goal of U.S. foreign policy.
Well, no, I mean, the Atlantic Council has always been a promoter of the transatlantic relationship between the United States and Europe. And that relationship hinges on, the Cold War type thinking of, advancing the rules-based international order and containing those nations that aren't willing to subordinate themselves to this rules-based international order. And first and foremost among those was the former Soviet Union, and now today, Russia. So the Atlantic Council has always been about the containment of Russia. And one of the ways that the United States and Europe have, contained Russia is by calling Russia out on, what they say are human rights violations. And they use this human rights issue as a means of sanctioning Russia and further curtailing Russia. So that's been the Atlantic Council's, bread and butter policy position. So hypocrisy has never stopped people who promote so-called American values as a means of selling foreign policy. So, just because America has some difficulties at home doesn't mean that the Atlantic Council and others of their ilk aren't going to continue to try to sell the United States as the shining city on the hill that should serve as a model for all other countries to base. Yeah, I mean, the truth is it is difficult to sell, American democracy is the cure-all